Good afternoon. I am your host, Leah Love, and you are tuning in to Forum 360, where we have a global outlook from a local view. I am so excited today because May is Mental Health Awareness Month, and we are here to talk to the guru herself, Ms. Lisa McCraney, who is the founder of Healing Hearts Counseling. So thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
So first off, tell me a little bit about your journey into mental health the arena.
Oh my goodness. So I did not grow up knowing that I was going to be a counselor. That was not the dream that I had. I was actually in school to be a radio and television production. Like, that was my major, and my minor was communication. I really thought that I was going to be Oprah's apprentice, and then when she got ready to retire, that she would present me to the world and I would be, I would just take over from there. And so I was in school to do that, although the thought process was there, the major was wrong. So in my senior year, I changed my major to my minor, which was communication, because I just did not like behind the cameras. There's a lot of pieces in that program that I was like, no, Lord, I see a vision, but this camera isn't it. And so I graduated with a communications degree. Mm-hmm. Had a life situation happen that I made a decision not to go home. I made a decision to kind of stay on campus and figure out life from there in the moment. An opportunity presented itself to me where if I was able to get back into school and be registered as a graduate student, then there was a job like right there, right now, but I had to get re-registered. And so as I was going through the program, like, okay, so never thought about grad school, what would I do? I saw counseling. And I was like, you help people. You've always helped people. This is what you do all your life. And so I just chose counseling. I did not know that counseling chose me well before I chose it. It was only after I kind of settled myself and settled into the program that it really did occur to me that this is who I am. It's who I've always been. It's my passion. It's my purpose. So that's how I landed here. And when I look back over life itself began to write my story. And I lived it out without knowing that I was the lead in it until life circumstances came around full circle. And so in that pivotal moment where I decided going back would not lead me to life, that standing where I was, making a stand for my healing, making a stand for my sanity would open the door, would burst the seams in a sense wide open and allow me to walk into my passion. And so that's really what happened to me. I did not know it growing up, but it knew me.
I love that. And you found your purpose.
Yes.
Now, your business, how does that tie into your purpose? What all do you do with your business?
So Healing Hearts Counseling and Consultation Services was born literally out of brokenhearted obedience. And so I have been working at a community-based agency knowing that there was a bigger something bubbling on the inside of me. But I've been always guilty. I used to be very guilty of staying at a place where I was doing good work. I've never been a bad employee. I've always risen to where I was at the top of whatever promotion was available to me, but there was still a deep yearning that something wasn't right. And I remember my husband, we went on a walk one day and he was like, you do know you can start your own agency. I was like, not me. Not me. I wrestled with that for about 2 years until we had a miscarriage. And when I was growing through the grieving and healing and wrestling with God about that whole thing, which that is a big wrestle, God reminded me through a very unique journey. I was going through one of my old journals that I keep, and went to a page that should have, it was around the time that we found out we were pregnant, and that journal entry in that week's time should have talked about the pregnancy, but it didn't. I came to a page that said, Healing Hearts is my baby. And it blew my mind. I was like, this shouldn't be here, but it was. And it was little notes that I had written to myself about Healing Hearts, what I wanted it to be, what I wanted it to do. And so that's how Healing Heart was born. It was one of those really sad, mad at God moments where he kind of pointed me back to purpose. Like, this is a part of the birth that I want you to have too, is I really want you to grow this. I want you to develop this. I want you to work and counsel people the way you see it in your heart, because I gave it to you. I want people to feel safe to talk. I want counseling to feel like home and not like a hospital. I want people to feel like there's healing and hope available, and I need you to show them. I need you to say, hey, I know what it's like to be in darkness. I know what it's like to be really, really sad. I know what it's like to be really, really hurt and anxious and even angry. But I want you to then turn and say, there's a light right there. And I want you to grab their hands and take them to it. And that is what Healing Hearts is.
I love it. I love it.
Mm.
Now, you did mention some of the reasons why people may feel shy or hesitant about getting counseling. Tell us, what are some of the stigmas associated with it, and why do you think that they're there?
I think one of the biggest stigmas is that people just don't understand what counseling is, who it's for, should they go, is it a good thing? If they say yes to counseling, does that mean they're crazy and that something's wrong with them? And most people just don't want to sign up to the crazy category. And so because people have a predisposition that counseling is bad, counseling means something is broken or I am broken, people tend to shy away from it because those are all negative kind of thought processes. And so one of the things that I love to do is to help kind of, when I talk to people about it, I say, let's level the playing field. Let's balance the room so that you can know that mental health and wellness is an everybody thing. It's not a us and them, we're okay and they're crazy, but it is an everybody situation. We all have a measure of mental health. We all have a measure of mental and emotional wellness. And when we can level the playing field, we all struggle. Like when I think of depression and anxiety, we all have a baseline as it pertains to how we manage that and walk in that. And so I think one of the biggest handicaps that stops people from coming to counseling is, what does that mean about me? And what are people going to say about me? And so if we can help people overcome that hurdle, that it means that you're normal. It means that you have a baseline that is deviating one way or another, that's causing some kind of problem in your life or some kind of barrier in your life. And then our job is to help you get close to that barrier and either kick it over, jump over it, knock it, whatever it is that we need to do to get that barrier out your way. That is what counseling does.
You know, I think that, like you said, a lot of people do think that they're crazy. But sometimes in reality, it's just you have some pieces of your puzzle that you need some extra help with putting together.
Or even seeing. My mom was a puzzle, she still is. And so growing up in our house, we never used our dining room table for what it was supposed to. But on the corner of one end of our dining room table, my mom, she's like a big puzzle, like 1,000-piece and beyond puzzle piece. And so she would make them, and she would always do the perimeter and have the outside edges together. And then all the other pieces were kind of categorized by color and what might fit. You know, it should fit in this area. And every now and then I would kind of go and just study and see and find a piece and like, oh, that piece does go there. And so sometimes you need somebody on the outside looking in that hasn't been so ingrained in your own story. It's not enmeshed with it. It doesn't have the same narrative. I don't have the same rules that you have. And so I might not be hindered by your rule because it's not my rule. And I can then come in with fresh eyes and say, maybe if we put this piece here, right? Sometimes we'll put pieces into puzzle and it almost fits. It's not the right piece. It looks like it should go there, but it's not quite the right piece. And so with fresh eyes, and I'm not affected by the rules of your culture. I'm not affected by the rules of your theys that said we can only do it this way. I'm able to push back against it because there's no consequence for me, and it allows you to see that there might be another option other than the one that I was always taught.
Love it. Explain to me your definition of grief.
It has grown and evolved. I'm a certified grief recovery method specialist now, and I've been one since 2020, and that has really helped me to normalize what grief means to me, I now know that grief is just our natural and normal reaction to a loss of any kind. It used to be that grief, I only saw grief through the narrative of somebody passed away, and that if you haven't lost somebody to death, then you don't have a grief story. What I now know, and I have lived, and I can even look back and understand that I've lived, grief has to do with not just death and loss or divorce. It also has to do with moving schools in the middle of the year like we did in the 5th grade, and all of a sudden no longer being popular, but being the new kid at school who everybody talked about. Grief has to do with finding out that your family doesn't make as much money as other people's families. I found that out in the 4th grade when somebody said, you know, you only have those lunch tickets because your mom is poor. Mm-hmm. And I said, huh? Because I had no idea. I didn't even know what that meant. I thought we all had lunch tickets and that we all ate lunch the same way. And it wasn't until someone put that into my mind and I went home and said, Mom, is this why we had lunch tickets? And then all of a sudden I noticed a difference that I had never ever seen before. Grief can be about, again, losing a baby I held in my heart but not in my hand. Grief can be about a breakup, right? Grief can be about not getting the promotion on the job I really, really wanted, and I thought I did all the work to it. So grief is the normal and natural reaction to a loss of any kind. And a lot of times it has a lot to do with us holding on to the emotional pain of the event. Not necessarily the event itself, but that the emotional cavity that event created. And typically we have not always been a society that says it's okay for us to deal with that emotion. We have to be hurt and move on. We have to be hurt and still produce. When most of us have a 3-day parameter at work where we get 3 days off, and then on the 4th day you have to grieve and show back up and clock back in. I remember having those bereavement days when I had the miscarriage, and I remember how hard it was to go back to work and how I suffered the remainder of that year. I was working for a community-based agency, and at the end of the year when we reviewed our contract to see if I had made productivity, there was a resounding, you've had a rough year. There was a resounding, you should have and needed to have taken enough time. But nobody told me that. No, I didn't know that I could take FMLA because my heart needed more time than 3 days to heal. What I do know is that I got 3 bereavement days, and I was expected to come back to work on day number 4, and I did so, and I suffered. And so people don't teach you that it's okay to pause for a second or multiple seconds, 100 seconds, and deal with that emotional pain that grief causes. And when we can look at it from that vantage point, we all are grievers in one way, shape, form, or fashion, and we all should pause for a second to see where grief has affected us.
I really appreciate that. And if you are just tuning in, we are talking to Lisa McCraney, who is the founder of Healing Hearts Counseling, and we're talking about managing your mental. But back to what you were saying, a lot of times people want to put a time limit on how long it takes you to get yourself back together. And in that, we understand that people have reactions. And some of those reactions can be good and some can be bad. So how do you, and I don't want to say bad, but I want to say bad. How do you decipher and tell someone, we can empathize with you experiencing this loss, but we're not going to condone and permit the behavior, bad behavior outside of that towards anybody else? What would you say to that?
So are you saying that the griever has began to show some bad behaviors? Typical. So, and I like that you wrestled with the word bad.
Yeah.
And I love that you did that in action, because that's what I ask people to do. So before I tell a griever anything, I start with the person who's wanting the griever to do something. And I want them to do exactly what you did. I want them to wrestle with the word choicing that they use. Bad behavior has something behind it. It's pushing. And so I want you to wrestle with whether or not you see bad behavior or whether you see natural and normal reactions to grief, right? Because sometimes I'll put my stuff on you and then ask you to go be better, when in reality I've got to do a little bit more work for myself. What part of whatever is happening is bad? right? Is the tear bad?
Is it what?
It's the tear that you see someone like when they're crying. Is that the bad thing? Are they easily angered? Is that the bad thing? Do they have less patience? Is that the bad thing? And so I need to ask myself, what is up with my reaction to what I see? Now, if somebody is being, homicidal or suicidal or something like that, then of course those are automatic red flags that we all stop for a second and say, this is not okay. Are you planning to hurt yourself? I hear you saying you're going to hurt somebody else, and those are automatic stops. But if somebody is easily irritated, that's a natural, normal part of grief. If somebody's tongue is a little faster to the draw, that's a natural, normal reaction to grief. And so is it something that they need to get better, or is it something that I need to talk about my narrative and what fuels it? And a lot of times we don't do that. We don't talk about what fuels our own narrative. I recently had to pause in a situation, a very loving situation with someone whose she kept laying her narrative on me, a faith-based narrative about going back to church. I'm not ready to do that yet, or at least in this season, I'm not ready to do that yet. One of the biggest reasons is I am so close to emotion, and I don't know that everybody knows how to hold my emotion well. I'm very active at church, and so I know most people, they want to come, they want to hug, they want to hold you a long time. And I'm not ready for that yet. And so I've been guarding my sanity and my safety. Well, that's uncomfortable for people. And so I had someone share their thought about me protecting my peace. And so I had to pause in that and really push back a little bit and say, you keep saying this, and that's not me. And eventually that person was able to say, you know what, you are right. I'm putting my stuff on you. When I kept saying, no, I'm not outside of fellowship. I'm staying home because I don't know that you all know how to hold my tears. Mm-hmm. But I'm not outside of fellowship. And eventually she said, you are right. I kept looking at it through this specific lens that she shared with me. But in reality, she was putting her grief response on me. And we all, that situation happened to me, but I've been guilty of trying to tell people what grief should look like for them. And that's a dangerous space to be. And so if bad behavior means they are threatening to kill someone, or they are actively talking about suicide ideation and they are threatening to harm themselves, then we want to talk about that, and we actually want to call it what it is. It's not bad behavior. It is homicidality or suicidality. If bad behavior is I am uncomfortable holding grief with them, then I want to talk about my stuff as it pertains to my isms around grief. And then I want to do my own work.
Now you mentioned guilt.
Mm-hmm.
And we had a conversation about guilt. Mm-hmm. And it's specifically how it pertains to balancing mm-hmm. certain things with parents, motherhood, just in general in life. Define to me guilt and your response to that.
Right. Again, something I learned as I was becoming certified with Grief Recovery Method, but it just blew my mind, and I've held on to it forever. We don't even say the word, we call it the G word, because guilt in and of itself implies that if I caused harm, I did it on purpose. Like I meant to harm you. I meant to, and typically if I'm meant to do those things, if I'm half a human, I'm gonna feel bad about hurting you on purpose. But typically when we harm someone, even my friend who I just talked about, her intention was not to harm me at all. And so while she was sorrowful for what was happening, I hope that she never harbors any guilt or that I never put any on her, because I know true to her core, she loves me deeply. And so I don't have to worry about her being a mean person or somebody I need to check out of my life, because her intent was not to harm me. And so I often challenge people when they struggle with guilt, the heaviness of guilt, which that when guilt gets laid upon you, it'll stop you in your tracks. You can't move forward because you're so heavy burdened about what you did or what you said. But when you can go back and you can do the work on, was my intent to harm? Was my intent foul? Was my intent to be damaging? If you can answer no to those, then we get to put the G word in the garbage and deal with what really was. I was trying to help, but I said the wrong things. I was trying to help, but whatever it was, but it can't be guilt. And I talk a lot about narrative. I tell people what we believe about a thing, how we even define a thing is how we'll respond to it. And so if I can get to the right definition, if I can get to the right narrative of what I'm saying, what I'm thinking, what I'm feeling, then I can make the right movement. I can make the right action. But if I keep holding on to the wrong word, then everything that I do based off of that wrong definition and that wrong narrative is going to keep leading me down the wrong road.
Awesome. If somebody wanted to begin this path and this journey of healing, and they weren't quite ready to come in, are there any resources that you would recommend to get them on that path and journey?
I always refer people to NAMI, N-A-M-I, the National Alliance of Mental Illness. NAMI is just a great place full of resources that just kind of brings the conversation to a normal, layman's term understanding of what different diagnoses are. I would often refer people just to kind of go there. If you have a family member that you're not so sure, they do a lot of great family and peer support work. So that's a great organization that I always plug. I don't get any kickback from it, but when people do good stuff, you want to make sure people know and have access to that. And then the other piece that I always tell people to do is to start within. Any client who has ever seen me always says the number one thing that I tell them is to tell yourself the truth every single time. And so, am I struggling with something, right? And you will put that something, that answer to that line, whatever that is. Am I struggling here? Is it keeping me up at night or waking me up early in the morning? Is it presenting an obstacle in terms of causing me not to be able to move forward in any area of my life? Do the people who I love and trust, like not my haters, not people who I'm not so sure about, but the folk who I love and trust, are they concerned about me? Like, are they saying, hey, sis, are you good? Multiple people. I might want to pause and acknowledge that I'm probably not good. I always, like my husband is my best mirror. I promised myself that if he noticed what I was internally wrestling with, then I had to tell myself the truth about that, because sometimes we'll wrestle internally and we'll come to the truth, but we won't say it out loud. And so when my mirror, my God-given mirror, and husbands aren't the only mirrors, I think good girlfriends are mirrors. Our children are mirrors, right? People who, again, those people who we love and we trust, when those people say, well, are you good? Then I have to pause for a second and tell myself the for real truth. And I think when we start there and when people are honest with themselves and we can say, no, I'm not good, that in and of itself will fuel you to make a phone call. And it may not be to a counselor or a wellness coach. It may be to a good girlfriend who has some resources. It may be to the pastor of my church or somebody at my church who I'm connected to. It may be to the auntie, grandma, sister, cousin, neighbor who always has an open seat at her counter for me. But when I can tell myself the truth, then I can tell others the truth. And typically when I do life with people and I tell the truth, we come alongside of one another. And if I can't get to help on my own, I know you'll take me to help. And so if I can start with telling myself the truth, I'll tell others the truth.
Tell yourself the truth.
Every single time.
I was just talking to my staff about self-reflection, and we don't do enough of it, I don't think.
Yeah.
And one of my friends, she says she has reflection time with her friends, and they talk consistently every single Monday, and they self-reflect to each other, their mirror time. And you just need that sometimes.
You do. And I think when we start doing it personally, our feelings won't get hurt when we do that together mirror time. Because a lot of times if I won't do it and then you come and you tell me the truth, I think you're trying to get me. And so now I'm in the defense because I'm like, what? You know, but typically when I tell myself the truth, when you show up as my good girlfriend, I smirk because I already know.
She know me.
I already know that by the time you say something, it's no secret to me. And that's how the Holy Spirit works, right? That's how the help that was promised to us. He works in that way where he'll, not only will he work on the inside of me, but everything connected to me speaks the same message. And so by the time it really comes from your mouth or from the preach word or from whatever, all I can really do is be like, for real, God? But I've already done the work of telling myself the truth. And so now we just get to work on resourcing and coping and all of those things. And people who love me won't let me sit and wallow. And if I love myself because I'm the blueprint, then typically I won't. By the time we get there, I'm not going to let myself sit and wallow in it either. I'm going to do something.
Well, thank you so much. I could sit and talk to you all day long. I hope you all enjoyed this and take that pause to mind your mind. It's so important really to process things, process life, losses, wins, celebrate those as well. I am your host, Leah Love, and this is Forum 360, where we have a global outlook from a local view. Have a great week.
Forum 360 is brought to you by John S. and James L. Knight Foundation, the Akron Community Foundation, Hudson Community Television, the Rubber City Radio Group, Shaw Jewish Community Center of Akron, Blue Green, Electric Impulse Communications, and Forum 360 supporters.